the 3rd of January 2026, and I'm reading Travels with My Aunt. It's a novel by Greene, published 1969. He met his Aunt Augusta for the first time after 50 years at his mother's funeral. His aunt is a great traveller, and he's travelling along with her. They're on their way to Istanbul. This is chapter 14. I felt glad that I had not lost my temper, but nonetheless I was shocked and needed a little time for reflection, so I climbed down onto the platform and began to look around me for food. It was the last chance before Belgrade next morning. I bought 6 ham rolls off a trolley and a bottle of Chianti and some sweet cakes. It was not so good a meal as chicken would have provided, I thought sadly, and what a dreary station it was. Travel could be a waste of time. This was the hour of the early evening, when the sun had lost its heat and the shadows fell across my small lawn. The hour when I would take my yellow watering can and fill it from the garden tap. Tuli's voice said, "Would you mind getting me some more Coke? There's nowhere on the train to keep it cold." "I don't mind warm Coke." Oh, the absurdity of it all. I could have cried aloud, for now the man with the trolley wouldn't take a pound note, and I had to give him 2 of the dollars which I was carrying in my pocketbook against emergencies. And he refused any change, though I knew the exact rate and told him the lira required. "Julian did a fabulous picture of a Coke bottle once," Tuli said. "Who's Julian?" I asked absent-mindedly. "That boyfriend, of course, I told you. He painted the Coke bright yellow. Fauve," she added in a defiant way. "He paints, does he? That's why he thinks the East's very important to him. You know, like Tahiti was for Gauguin. He wants to experience the East before he starts on his big project. Let me take the Coke." There was less than an hour's wait at Venice, but the dark was falling when we pulled out and I saw nothing at all. I might have been travelling Clapham for Victoria. Tuli sat with me and drank one of her Cokes. I asked her what her boyfriend's project was. "He wants to do a series of enormous pictures of Heinz soups in fabulous colours, so a rich man could have a different soup in each room in his apartment. Say, fish soup in the bedroom, potato soup in the dining room, leek soup in the drawing room, like they used to have family portraits. There would be these fabulous colours, or fauve, and the cans would give a sort of unity. Do you see what I mean? It would be kind of intimate. You wouldn't break the mood every time you change rooms, like you do now if you have de Stael in one room and a Rouault in another." The memory of something I had seen in a Sunday supplement came back to me. I said, "Surely somebody once did paint a Heinz tin soup." "Not Heinz, Campbell's," Tuli said. "That was Andy Warhol. I said the same thing to Julian when he first told me of the project. Of course, I said, Heinz and Campbell are not a bit the same shape. Heinz is sort of squat, and Campbell's are long, like English pillar boxes. I love your pillar boxes. They are fabulous. But Julian said that wasn't the point. He said that there are certain subjects which belong to a certain period and culture, like the Annunciation did. Botticelli wasn't put off because Piero della Francesca had done the same thing. He wasn't an imitator. And think of all the nativities. Well, Julian says we sort of belong to the soup age, only he didn't call it that. He said it was the art of technostructure. In a way, you see, the more people who paint soups, the better. It creates a culture. One nativity wouldn't have been any use at all. It wouldn't have been noticed." I was badly out of my depth with Tuli in terms of culture and human experience. She was closer to my aunt. She would never, I felt sure, have criticized Mr. Visconti. She would have accepted him, as she accepted Julian's project, a voyage to Istanbul, my company, her baby. Where does your mother live? I guess she's in Bonn at the moment. She married a man on Time Life who covers West Germany and Eastern Europe. So they move around a lot, like father. Do you want a cigarette? Not for me, and you'd better wait till we get past the next frontier. It was nearly 9:30 in the evening when we arrived at Cesana. A surly passport man looked at us as though we were imperialist spies. Old women, heavy laden with small passes, came down the unplatformed track, making for the third class. They emerged from everywhere, like a migration, even from between the goods trucks, which stood uncoupled all along the line, looking as though they would never be linked together. No one else joined the train. No one got off. There were no lights, no waiting room in sight. It was cold, and the heating had not been turned on. On the road beyond, if there was a road, no cars passed, no railway hotel offered a welcome. I'm cold, Thule said. I'm going to bed. She offered to leave me a cigarette, but I refused. I didn't want to be compromised on this cold frontier. Another uniformed man looked in and regarded my new suitcase on the rack, with hatred. At moments during the night I woke. In Ljubljana, in Zagreb, but there was nothing to be seen except the lines of stationary rolling stock, which looked abandoned, as though nothing was left anywhere to put in the trucks. No one had the energy anymore to roll them, and it was only our train which steamed on, impelled by a foolish driver who hadn't realized that the world had stopped and there was nowhere for us to go. At Belgrade, Thule and I had breakfast in the station hotel, dry bread and jam and bad coffee, and we bought a bottle of sweet white wine for lunch, but they had no sandwiches. I let my aunt sleep on. It was not a meal worth waking her to share. Why are you two going to Istanbul? Thule asked, taking a spoonful of jam. She had given up trying to crumble the bread. She likes to travel, I said. But why Istanbul? I haven't asked her. In the fields, horses moved slowly along, dragging harrows. We were back in the pre-industrial age. Thule and I were both depressed, yet it wasn't the lowest point of our journey. That came as evening fell in Sofia, and we tried to buy something to eat. But no one would take any money but Bulgarian, except at an exorbitant rate. And even when I agreed to that, there were only tepid sausages on sale, made of some coarse, unrecognizable meat, and chocolate cake made of a chocolate substitute, and pink fizzy wine. I hadn't seen my aunt all day, except once when she looked in on us and refused Thule's last bar of chocolate and said sadly and unexpectedly, I loved chocolate once. I'm growing old. So this is the Great Orient Express, Thule said. All that's left of it. Istanbul can't be much worse, can it? I've never been there, but I don't imagine so. I guess you're going to tell me that I mustn't smoke because there'll soon be another frontier. There'll be 3 frontiers, I said, looking at the timetable, in less than 4 hours. The Bulgarian frontier, the Greek-Macedonian frontier, the Turkish frontier. Maybe it's real luxury travel, Thule said, for people not in a hurry. Do you think they have an abortionist on the train? It's lucky I'm not 9 months gone, isn't it? Or I wouldn't know whether my baby was going to be Bulgarian or Turkish, or what was the next one? Greek-Macedonian. That sounds a bit special. I'd choose that. Not a Bulgar. If he was a boy, there'd be dirty jokes. But you wouldn't have a choice. I'd hang on. When they said push, I wouldn't push. Not till after the Greek-Macedonian frontier. How long are we in Greece-Macedonia? Only 40 minutes, I said. My, it's complicated. I'd have to work quick, she added. It's not funny at all. I'm scared. What's Julian going to say and the curse hasn't come. I really thought the train would do it, sort of shake it out of me, I mean. It's Julian's fault. It's Julian's fault as much as yours. But it isn't any longer, not with a pill. It's all the girl's fault now. I really did forget. When I take a sleeping pill, I wake up muzzy and I forget. And then, when I take a methadone to wake up properly, I get so excited. I don't remember all the dull things, like the pill and washing the dishes. But I guess Julian won't believe all that. He'll feel trapped. He often feels trapped. He was trapped first by his family, he says, and then he was nearly trapped by Oxford. So he went away fast, without a degree. Then he very nearly got trapped by the Trotskys, but he realized just in time. He sees traps a terrible long way ahead. But Henry, I don't mean to be a trap. Really, I don't. I can't call you Henry. It doesn't sound like a real name. Can I call you Smudge? Why Smudge? I had a dog once called Smudge. I used to talk to him a lot. When father and mother got divorced, I told him all the horrid details about the mental cruelty, I mean. She leaned against me in the carriage. I liked the smell of her hair. I suppose if I had known more about women, I could have identified the shampoo she must have had in Paris. Her hand was on my knee, and the enormous wristwatch stared up at me, with its black-white face and its 4 figures in scarlet, 12, 3, 6, 9, as if those were the only important ones to remember. The hours when you had to take your medicine. I remembered Miss Keene's minute gold wristwatch like a doll's, which Sir Alfred had given her on her 21st birthday. In its tiny ring it contained all the figures of the hours, as though none were unimportant or without its special duty. Most of the hours of my life had been eliminated from Tooley's watch. There were no hours marked for sitting quietly and watching a woman tat. I felt as though one night in Southwood I had turned my back on any possibility of home, so that here I was shaken up and down between 2 segments of Bulgarian darkness. What was the mental cruelty? I had to ask her questions. It was the only way in which I could find my way about in this new world, but questioning was not a habit I had ever formed. For years people had asked me questions. What unit trust would you recommend? Do you think I should sell my 100 Imperial tobacco shares before the next cancer report? And when I retired, most of the questions I might have wanted to ask were answered for me in every man his own gardener. The only mental cruelty I ever saw personally, Tooley said, was when father woke her up bringing her early morning tea in bed. I don't think that awful Bulgarian sausage was good for my metabolism. I've got a terrible stomach ache. I'll go and lie down. You don't think it was horse, do you? I've always understood that horse has a sweetish taste. Oh God, Smudge, she said. I didn't want a literal answer, not real information, I mean. She dabbed her lips against my cheek and was off. I went down the corridor rather nervously to find Aunt Augusta. I had hardly seen her all day, and the problem of Tooley was one which I felt she ought to share. I found her with a Baedeker opened and a map of Istanbul spread over her knee. She looked like a general planning a campaign. I'm sorry about yesterday afternoon, Aunt Augusta, I said. I really didn't mean to say anything against Mr. Visconti. After all, I don't know the circumstances. Tell me more about him. He was a quite impossible man, my aunt said, but I loved him, and what he did with my money was the least of his faults. For example, he was what they call a collaborator. During the German occupation, he acted as an advisor to the German authorities on questions of art, and he had to get out of Italy very quickly after the death of Mussolini. Goering had been making a big collection of pictures, but even he couldn't easily steal pictures from places like the Uffizi, where the collection was properly registered. But Mr. Visconti knew a lot about the unregistered, all sorts of treasures hidden away in palazzos, almost as crumbling as your Uncle Joe's. Of course, his part got to be known, and there'd be quite a panic in a country place when Mr. Visconti appeared taking lunch in the local taverna. The trouble was, he wouldn't play even a crooked game straight, or the Germans might have helped him to escape. He began to make money from this marchés, and that not to tip off the Germans. This gave him liquid cash, or sometimes a picture he fancied for himself, but it didn't make him friends, and the Germans soon suspected what was going on. Poor old devil, she added. He hadn't a friend he could trust. Mario was still at school with the Jesuits, and I had gone back to England when the war began. What happened to him in the end? I thought for a long time he had been liquidated by the partisans, for I never believed that story about the gondolier. I suspect he got someone to spread it for him. Mr. Visconti, as I told you, was not a man for fighting with knives or fists. A man who fights never survives long, and Mr. Visconti was great at survival. Why, the old sod, she said with a tender delight. He survives to this moment. He must be 84 if he's a day. I wrote to Mario, and Mario wrote to me, and that's why you and I have taken the train to Istanbul. I couldn't explain all of that in London. It was too complicated, and anyway, I hardly knew you. Thank goodness for the good brick, that's all I can say. The gold brick? Never mind. That's quite another thing. You told me about a good gold brick at London Airport, Aunt Augusta. Surely... Of course not. It's not that one. That was quite a little one. Don't interrupt. I'm telling you now about poor Mr. Visconti. It seems he's fallen on very lean times. Where is he? In Istanbul? It's better you shouldn't know, for there are people still after him. Oh dear, he certainly escaped the hard way. Mr. Visconti was a good Catholic, but he was very, very anti-clerical. And yet, in the end, it was the priesthood which saved him. He went to a clerical store in Rome when the Allies were coming close, and he paid a fortune to be fitted out like a Monsignor, even to the purple socks. He said that a friend of his had lost all his clothes in a bombing raid, and they pretended to believe him. Then he went with a suitcase to the lavatory in the Excelsior Hotel, where we had given all those cocktail parties to the cardinals, and changed. He kept away from the reception desk, but he was unwise enough to look in at the bar. The barman, he knew, was very old and short-sighted. Well, you know, in those days, a lot of girls used to come to that bar to pick up German officers. One of the girls, I suppose it was the approach of the Allied troops that did it, was having a crise de conscience, a crisis of conscience. She wouldn't go to her friend's bedroom. She regretted her lost purity. She would never sin again. The officer plied her with more and more cocktails, but with every drink she became more religious. Then she spied Mr. Visconti, who was having a quick whiskey in a shady corner. "Father," she cried to him, "hear my confession." You can imagine the tension at the bar, the noise outside as the evacuation got underway, the crying children, people drinking up what there was in the bar, the Allied planes overhead. How did you hear this story, Aunt Augusta? Mr. Visconti and told Mario the essentials when he got to Milan, and I can imagine the rest. Especially, I can picture poor Mr. Visconti in his purple socks. My child, he said, this is no fit place for a confession. Never mind the place. What does the place matter? We are all about to die, and I am in mortal sin. Please, please, Monseigneur. She had noticed his socks by this time. What worried Mr. Visconti most was the attention she was provoking. My child, he told her, in this state of emergency, a simple act of contrition is enough. But oh no, she wasn't going to be fobbed off with something cheap like that. Bargain sale owning to closing down of premises. She came and knelt at his knees. Your Grace, she exclaimed. She was used to giving officers a superior rank. It nearly always pleased a captain to be called a major. I'm not a bishop, Mr. Visconti said. I'm only a humble Monseigneur. Mario questioned his father closely about this episode, and I have invented nothing. If anyone invented a detail, it is Mario. You have to remember that he writes verse plays. Father, the girl implored, taking the hint, help me. The secrecy of the confessional, Mr. Visconti pleaded back. They were now, you see, pleading to each other, and she poured Mr. Visconti's knee while he poured the top of her head in an ecclesiastical way. Perhaps it was the pawnings which made the German officer interrupt with impatience. For God's sake, he said, if she wants to confess, Monsignor, let her. Here's the key of my room, just down the passage, past the lavatory. So off went Mr. Visconti with the hysterical girl. He remembered just in time to put down his whiskey. He had no choice, though he hadn't been to confession himself for 30 years, and he had never learned the priest's part. Luckily, there was an air conditioner in the room breathing heavily, and that obscured his whispers, and the girl, too, was too much concerned with her role to pay much attention to his. She began right away. Mr. Visconti had hardly time to sit on the bed, pushing aside a steel helmet and a bottle of schnapps before she was getting down to details. I had wanted the whole thing finished as quickly as possible, but he told Mario that he couldn't help becoming a little interested now. She had got started and wanting to know a bit more. After all, he was a novice, though not in the ecclesiastical sense, and I make here a break and continue this soon. And have a happy New Year's Saturday.